For us, it's about the difference between brand lift and an overall aided brand awareness.
Welcome back to the Marketing Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Mark Friedman, and this is a milestone one, episode 150. When I started doing this show more than 6 years ago, I never expected that I would do 150 shows. It's been a great learning experience for me, and I hope also for the listeners. I've tried to balance the show with a broad range of guests and with people that can help you learn. We've stuck with the promise to bring you 3 key takeaways during each show, so I hope we have succeeded. Today's guest is Garth Weber, Senior Vice President of Brand Marketing and E-commerce at Duluth Trading Company, and his path here is anything but conventional. Garth built his career across 2 decades on both sides of the business, agency and client side, with stops leading brand and creative work at Nike, Adidas, and Wilson Sporting Goods before landing at Duluth. What makes him different is where he started, an MFA in fiction and a grounding in philosophy, which shaped how he thinks about storytelling long before he ever thought about brand strategy. Now at Duluth, he's steering a workwear brand rooted in direct mail through a full transformation into digital and retail, all while staying true to what makes the brand work in the first place. This show is presented by Forder and Details Interactive. Before we get started, a quick thank you as always to Max Brandstetter of the Wild Business Growth Podcast for producing this episode. You can reach him at max@maxpodcasting.com to help bring your podcast to life. Let's open the playbook. Ready, break. Welcome to the Marketing Playbook Podcast. My guest today for episode 150 is Garth Weber. Garth is the Senior Vice President of Brand Marketing and E-commerce at Duluth Trading Company, where he oversees enterprise brand strategy, creative direction, and omnichannel growth. His career spans over 2 decades of leadership across both the client and agency ecosystems, including extensive experience on the agency side and as a former agency owner. His corporate background features time at Nike, at Adidas, where he served as the Senior Director of Global Brand Design, and at Wilson Sporting Goods, where he was the VP of Brand and Creative. Uniquely combining an MFA in fiction and a background in philosophy with rigorous commercial data, he specializes in building high-performing narrative frameworks that drive scalable retail and digital performance. Garth, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So it's not too often when I read somebody's bio, they're talking about an MFA in fiction and then, this background in philosophy and then commercial data. So you've got that left and right brain going.
Yeah, it's funny because when I first started out, I was going to school. My parents are educators, and I had always assumed that I would end up somehow in academia or of some sort. So I had vociferous reader as a kid, pursued sort of the passion around philosophy. I also had a double minors in history and literature. So real, really analytical or not. And it was somewhere along the line when I was looking to go into grad school that I realized that I didn't want to be an academic. I didn't want to teach, but I still wanted to continue down that path. So I ended up going into fiction, which was a complete sort of left turn for me. But it was, again, a passion that I wanted to pursue. And coming out of that, I was really struck with, now what do I do? I've got philosophy, I've got fiction, I've got like some less than highly valuable skills. And I got lucky because I went into editing right away. I had an opportunity coming out of grad school to work as an editor, and I found I just really, really loved that. And it was more about shaping not only you bring a creative spirit to it, but it was really sort of taking a look at other people's work, shaping it as best as you can out of it. And I realized through that process that I am more creative, yes, but more analytical or more tuned to making something work than being purely sort of creative expression, and got really, really excited about that. And I didn't really know that about myself until that process. And I think maybe this is true for a lot of people where there was nothing, the career that I'm on and have been on for the past however many years was not something that I dreamt up when I was 16 years old. I didn't have a passion for art or a passion for, or that creation sort of thing. But that was one of the pivots in my life where I realized I was good at something and that I really, it's something that I enjoyed. So I just kind of like kept pulling on that thread.
So it's interesting you kind of hit the first story, which we like to get at in the show. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Salem, Oregon, which is just about an hour south of Portland, Oregon. Back in the day, so that's the Willamette Valley, and I grew up there working on orchards and things like that in the summer times. And all those orchards over the course of the last 20, 25 years have become vineyards. So it was kind of it's funny to watch. I mean, it's much more wine is much more valuable than gooseberries, and cherries. So, but that's where I grew up, and then I went to college in Wisconsin and Illinois. So very different. But ever since I've come to lived in Portland for a very long time, but ever since I've come to the Midwest, there's something about it that I really fell in love with and have, regardless of where I've went since, pretty much always ended up back here. And I'm in the Chicagoland area now.
Okay, awesome. One of the things that's, interesting about the fiction part, many of the roles that you seem to have had over your career, and we'll hit some of them, have been around storytelling. So did that kind of play, you had that fiction background and kind of many of the roles that you've had?
Yeah. So again, when I was a kid, I just could not stop reading. I was reading constantly, and it was all around narrative, obviously. And I think that's one of the things that I would say as I was thinking about what a through line would be through my entire career. And even like today, when you think about AI and some other stuff, there is storytelling is at the heart of all of it. And I think the journey, frankly, even the physical journey, let's say, that you undertake going through a retail store or that you undertake going through a website is also connected to that. I think it's a sort of an attract and a reveal and tease to the next thing, much like if you're reading a story, what keeps you going from one chapter to the next. It's not getting all of the information and trying to find out what the next bit is that interests you. So it is all connected for me, and with brand as well.
You mentioned that after school you got an early start in graphic design. Maybe tee that up for me as a precursor to you starting your own creative agency.
Like I said, I was doing editing, and then along the line, I realized, well, I was a poetry editor, to put a more finer point on it. And at some point, I realized I needed to make some money or wanted to make some money. I wanted to do something like, what else could I do? So I did some copywriting. And in that process, I learned, I remember one project in particular where essentially I was given the opportunity to do the entire, it was a small project, but an entire project for the Museum of Contemporary Art here in Chicago. And so I did the design for it, did the writing for it. And again, it's another one of those pivots where I realized I didn't know I was a graphic designer, or I didn't know that I should say maybe more accurately that I could visualize the idea that I had. And so that ignited another passion in me. But what what also became very painfully apparent to me is I had no training in it, so I didn't even know how to use the software. I didn't know how to get from point A to point B in Photoshop. I had a whole bunch of stuff that I had to learn just functionally to be able to pull that off. And so there was a lot of learning, like working during the day, trying to learn how to be a graphic designer at night, working for a number, like maybe 3 or 4 years through a constant sense of fear that somebody like that I didn't know what I'm doing. Yeah, do I really know what I'm doing? What am I doing? Am I wasting this time? Because where is this going? And you can imagine as somebody who tells his parents that he's going to study philosophy in school and then he's going to go get a graduate degree in fiction and then now I'm going to be a graphic designer. They would they were very supportive, but at the same time, I questioned myself the whole time. I was like, is this really, where's this going to go? But I was learning and with more than just the software at the time and learning how to storytell in a different in a different way. And when I had an opportunity, I moved to Phoenix for a studio job, and I was working for a small studio. But I had an opportunity at that point to join as art director the Phoenix New Times, which is a big, at the time, one of the more famous, one of the more long-standing alternative news weeklies. As and it was there that again another pivot happened where I was able to take stories, literally stories that I were written by others and that I had to figure out a way to visualize in a way that was compelling and compelling on covers, compelling in editorial design for a circulation of almost 500,000 people on a weekly basis. And so that same sense of, let's say, maybe anxiety or of like jeopardy was even heightened because more people were going to see it. I still was trying to learn how to do it, but I absolutely loved it. Like I worked my fingers off in that job because I was learning so much. And I made a number of large mistakes. It's some rather embarrassing. But the thing that was also great about the nature of that job is it was a weekly. So whatever mistake I made this week, the thing it was gone, and now here comes another one. Same with any success I had. It would be like, well, yep, now there's the next one. So that environment helped me like not hold on to either of those things. I was just having this conversation with somebody last week about, yeah, there's somebody, a younger person on my team about developing, and I didn't realize, but that was one of the first times where I poured everything I had into it, and I almost had no attachment to it afterwards. And it really set me up well for being in the creative field for a long time.
Well, fear is a great motivator, and you had some fear, you had some stress and anxiety, so it sometimes propels you. So that's a
Yeah.
great story. So how did you parlay that into starting your own agency? So now you're not only doing the work, but maybe you're managing people, you're running a business, very different experience.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like it is a natural progression from, if you think about somebody who is a editor moving into a writer, then suddenly becoming an art director, and then onto other creative roles. I basically was pursuing a thread of curiosity. Like, for example, when I was working in agencies and we would get briefs, I would always question, quite frankly, whether the brief was correct, right? So I wanted to dig into that, and then I wanted to talk to the strategist, and then I wanted to like, is the strategist getting the right information? I kept on trying to get to the root of what the problem was that we were trying to solve, and that eventually led me to having some pretty good relationships with the clients that we were serving. And there's one group that I was working with. I was leading the retail design team, so we're designing stores and marketing communications inside of retail stores. And I had a small team of like 4 people. They were all freelancers. And it occurred to me that the agency that I was working with they didn't want to do this work anymore. And I wanted to still do it. I really enjoyed it. And so pulled together a small team, brought in another partner, and we decided to take that one client with, again, freelancers. So the overhead was zero. And we just started working for them. And it was one of the Nike subsidiaries. We started working for them on these retail store designs, and that just rather quickly led to other opportunities. And something that I learned at that moment was when I made myself essentially available to that. Like I have a client, yes, so it was an easy transition. But as soon as people started learning that we were doing our own thing, that we were expanding beyond just retail, et cetera, it grew pretty quickly in terms of the other opportunities that arose. And so we just rode that for a while, but it really started with the desire. Again, it didn't feel very dangerous, if I'm honest, because I was already doing the work, just now doing it differently.
This episode is brought to you by Forder, and they've got something worth hearing about. There's a conference coming up in New York on October 14th called Impact, and I'll actually be there. So if you're planning to attend, I'd love to connect in person. It's built for e-commerce leaders navigating AI, agentic commerce, and the very real pressure on margins right now. Practical conversations, senior people, real challenges to solve. If you want to go, and I think you should, there's a promo code that gets e-commerce leaders like you in for free. Just head to forder.com/impact and use the code PLAYBOOK, all lowercase, at checkout. That's forder.com/impact, and the code is PLAYBOOK, PLAYBOOK, all lowercase. Enjoy the conference. So good run there. And now there's this another pivot to a pretty large organization, and that was Adidas.
Yeah, so it was Adidas. So I'll back up a second because I think the Nike bit is really important to everything that came after. In that I joined Nike after moving back to Portland from Phoenix, and I was in the ACG group, the All Conditions Gear group, which at the time was a separate business unit and was outdoor recreation, essentially outdoor lifestyle. And we had to do everything because it was a separate business unit. We didn't necessarily we weren't protected, if you will, by Nike. So we had to do everything on our own, which was very helpful for me to learn web design, to learn PR events, to learn retail, et cetera, which parlayed 2 years into moving into the global brand design. And in global brand design at Nike, it was a very interesting time to be there because it was post-Jordan era, yet still had a lot of the vapor trails from that. And some of the best marketers, brand marketers in the world were there doing their thing. And the company was brand first, design first. Everything was about that, was even more so about design behaviors rather than product. Product was just more of a proof point that came out of all of these points of view and philosophies. And that mindset, if you will, that sort of training is stuff that I use today. Like it was foundational for me in terms of how I look at brand. And when I took that, I've taken that, like I said, throughout my entire career. And when we were at the agency, and Nike was one of our clients, Adidas came along as another one of our clients, and I'm pretty proud of this actually. It took us a minute, but we figured out a way to be able to be one of the only agencies in the United States and potentially even in the world that were able to work with both Nike and Adidas as one of their preferred client partners. You can imagine the firewalls and shenanigans that took, but we made it work, and I'm really proud of the politics that it took to get there and the negotiations. But that parlayed eventually into an opportunity to work globally with Adidas, not as a client anymore, but as as on the brand side. And my family, we jumped at it because the opportunity to move to Europe to do some of that more global work. But yeah, so all of that's sort of that learning, the brand first storytelling, et cetera, that I learned at Nike, I took with me to Adidas.
How do you balance the brand side and the performance marketing side in a business? We'll talk about Duluth in a bit and the role that you have there. But sometimes they work together, sometimes they're a bit opposed. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, well, Duluth's a great example of that because we're also a vertical retailer. So you have it's brand, performance marketing, and actually also retail locations, and all of those often work against each other or can. A mentor of mine many years ago said all marketing is brand marketing, and what he meant by that and what I take to it too is like even when you're saying 20% off all shorts or whatever, you can do it in a way that's brand forward. And I firmly believe that to be true. You can find ways through messaging and tone, through placement, through how you approach that performance marketing that only your brand could do. And so I mean, there is the funnel, et cetera. We use it daily, but at the same time, I'm really looking at, let's say, performance marketing or say brand marketing masquerading as performance marketing. So at the end of the day, when it comes to, you're able to measure almost in real time how things are performing in your marketing messaging. So you're always adjusting that, but trying to have the foundation be how would this brand approach it versus another brand and keep that unique flavor. So, and maybe that's just for frankly, my own like that problem interests me to solve. And as long as the numbers deliver, then we'll keep doing it.
You were in Europe with, I guess, Adidas. I pronounce it the American way. But when you were there, what was your scope of responsibility? You were there for, was it 4 years or so?
Yeah, a little over 4 years. I came on board in 2017, and this happened to be the time when, for the first time, in maybe perhaps ever, Adidas fell out of second place in North America behind Nike. So from the 80s. So and they fell behind Under Armour. So there was a bit of a panic. Like we've got to outside of China, North America was the market, and to be able to lose market share. So that was sort of the all hands on deck. That's one of the reasons they started hiring a bunch of Americans. We opened our first ever flagship store, which is weird. There were brand center stores, a whole bunch of other store formats, but the first flagship that Adidas put together was we designed and launched on Fifth Avenue, still there today. So all of that was around that sort of North American market. But then beyond that, after that, basically my scope was all around the sport performance side of the business. So we had two sides of the business. You have the originals, which is more lifestyle, and then you have sport performance. And so I led all of the key categories of like running, soccer, global football, training, tennis, specialty sports, things like that. So everything that was on the side of the house where it was more about athletes than about street culture.
So you had a great run there in a business that was doing really well, though maybe it lost share a bit. And then Wilson Sporting Goods comes along, at least for me, from a consumer perspective, two very different companies, different focus. What was your charge there? And what was interesting about making that change?
This is coming out of COVID as well. So there was some personal motivations around how long did we've been in Europe for 4 years. How long we loved it. How long did we stay? COVID happens, hadn't seen our family in 2 years. Wilson comes calling. You're like, oh, okay, this could be interesting. And after speaking with them for quite a while in terms of like what the role would be, it was fascinating to me what they were trying to do. So as you rightly point out, they're very different businesses. Wilson is a hard goods provider, equipment provider. They're famous for their tennis rackets and basketballs, etc. What they were trying to do was to perform, perhaps for their first time ever, as a brand. And I'll unpack that for just a second. The strategy, the long-term strategy for many, many years, generations perhaps, was to not act as a generalist. They didn't want to be known, even though this Wilson Sporting Goods, they didn't want to be known as like a generalist. They wanted to be known as, if you're a tennis player, Wilson is a tennis brand. If you're a basketball player, basketball brand, golfer, golf brand. To be so good endemically that you didn't think of the other sort of business units. And I would say by and large, they were very successful at that. So then to change the remit, and this comes after they delisted, well, they got bought by Armour, delisted themselves. There was a whole new sort of like business strategy around Wilson. So within that, so how do we perform more as a brand rather than as four different business units? And so that was the challenge. That was what was really interesting. And I would say the key component to making that possible was launching sportswear as a fifth business unit, if you will. And that provided an opportunity, let's say just structurally, regardless of brand, structurally, it provided the company an opportunity to be thought of seasonally rather than just as, I mean, seasonally, but also as sort of like when your equipment runs out or whatever, then you come back. And if you think of a life cycle, for example, of a tennis racket, it's typically for the consumer 5 years, 2 years or thereabouts if you play all the time. So this would provide an opportunity to invite that tennis player back every 3 months, and for things more than just balls or strings or whatnot. So there was sort of if you will, a palette on which we could put a lot of things, and we started it direct to consumer only. you have this massive wholesale network across the globe for Wilson, and it was well over 80, like 87% of their business was wholesale, and then sportswear was on 100% D2C, and it was, you can imagine, a test and learn. We did $10 million, over $11 million in our first year, D2C only, which was a big surprise to everybody. And so the second year, we started opening our own Wilson stores. So D2C stores that had not been done before for the brand. And then within those D2C stores, we sold sportswear. But then we also started selling hard goods, curated sets of hard goods. And that has performed really well. And now I don't know how many stores they have across the globe, but a couple dozen or more.
It must have been an interesting for some of the management there that were so used to hard goods, low return rates, I assume, the lack of overstock, if managed correctly. And now you're going into apparel, you've got lots of SKUs, you've got lots of size returns, perhaps, just a very different animal.
Very different. And it was messy. I mean, and I think this, we sort of ring fenced it in the D2C channels. We had a very tight, sort of FC model. We the supply chain very tight, like it almost sort of ran like its own business, so it didn't impact anything else. Where the rub came was on the website, because the website is where we also sold all of the other things. Of course, a very small percentage was the overall business, but that's where a lot of the sort of real estate conversations, what do you lead? What do you lead with? What's on the homepage? And because of the initial early success of sportswear, the more real estate we gave it, the more performance it gave us. So we bought bought some time in there to see it perform better. But yeah, I would say, but when I left, there was still active conversations about whether we should be in sportswear, because it wasn't necessarily raising all boats, if you will. Baseball business wasn't receiving any lift from it, for example. And over the course of the years that I was there, we did focus or narrow its focus around tennis and golf and some of the other more like, you would imagine, sportswear first type businesses. But when we started it was pretty broad, and yeah, there was some challenges with not in my backyard kind of thing.
The devil is in the details. You probably have heard that phrase time and time again in your professional life. Projects get started with great intentions, but you no longer have the time to pay attention to the little things that could make the difference between success and failure. At Details Interactive, you can discuss your business with a seasoned direct-to-consumer marketing executive who's helped launch and grow web businesses and integrate multi-channel marketing initiatives. Learn more at detailsinteractive.com. Let's jump to Duluth Trading. For those that may not know the brand, tell us what you sell. Give us some perspective, if you can, on the size of the business, and we'll get a little bit into the differences of the role that you have today with some of the others that you've had.
Yeah, Duluth Trading it's a workwear brand with some lifestyle tendencies. Like we sell a lot of underwear, for example, and it's domestic only. It's a U.S. only company, publicly traded. It started in Duluth, Minnesota, as you can imagine, and then moved eventually to the Madison, Wisconsin area. Very, very fiercely proud of its Midwest origins and its Midwest values. The company, we're around 600 million in sales, and we've sort of contracted a bit in the last couple of years as we sort of gear up for what's the next phase of growth. I mean, 4/5 of our existence, we are a direct mail company. So a lot of catalogs, very unique catalogs, super successful. Then we launched a website to help with the catalog orders. And then in 2016-ish, 2015, 2016, we started opening our own stores. So we've been a direct retailer all along, but now we have our own fleet of stores, around 66 stores around the country now. So it gives you a sense of the scale. Like we're not huge, but we have a fiercely loyal customer base. So the more stores we open, the more people are excited about the store in their area. So that's a nice from a brand perspective for me. That's a great place to start, right? To have that foundation.
Is direct mail still a component of the business?
It is, but it's much, much less. And I think I would say one of the biggest changes that I've had to make joining is like as we need to go after new customers, like and the demographic, if you will, or the makeup of the new customer is not necessarily younger, but it is, but it's more like they're more they interact with media differently than our older core customers do. And so, and this is before my time, but since maybe 2021, the catalog business has been declining. Like we've allocated less budget to it because it wasn't performing as well as we needed it to. And while that was declining, we needed to, and we weren't building up the digital side of the house. So a big part of my job was to begin the digital transformation here. So we still do, again, contracting to grow. We still do some direct mail with an eye towards doing more again in a robust way. But man, the playbook that was here that worked for a long time was catalogs, 30 some odd books a year, linear TV ads in every sports place we could get, History Channel, evening news, these sorts of things. And then we would open a store in your area. And that worked really, really well. That playbook or core pieces of that playbook still work, but as you can imagine, we have to shift gears.
With the demographic of the customer, TikTok and Instagram and Meta in general play a major role, I would imagine.
They do. Yeah, big role.
And what about, is influencers, are influencers, a piece of the pie?
They are. So we've really been developing a robust channel strategy in the last couple years. And in so doing, learning, what works for us with which cohort. And there's a couple of things. There's the older customer who is not on Instagram. They're on Facebook. So we've got that covered, as you can imagine. The younger customer is more, to your point, on Instagram or TikTok or even, other platforms. And so we can't speak to those groups in the same way, right? So we have to have a really robust channel strategy in that regards. And so there's also the women's business, frankly. When it relates to our competitors, Carhartt and Dickies, et cetera, we have a much stronger women's business than they do. They're growing, they're catching up, et cetera. But we definitely work from a position of strength because we have a really strong position in gardening for us. So that is also another factor of where our women's customer is and how we reach them, which is different than our men's customer. So it's a bit to really deliver value to all of our cohorts, if you will. It becomes that digital landscape becomes rather complicated.
Every business has the core metrics that they want to follow, and it's getting, in one respect, with AI, and we'll talk about that in a second, perhaps getting more complicated because there's more data we can get at, more metrics we want to manage. But when you think about your business today, what are the few things that you might tell folks that are listening that you really need to understand about your business?
I would say for us, it's about the difference between brand lift, like what we see when people get our communications, what they remember, and then overall aided brand awareness and the gap between those two. And mostly because we are not necessarily yet in, as has been announced, we're not yet in full-on growth mode. We're sort of building the foundation and in order to do that, we really have to understand that gap. So that's something we're really paying attention to because ultimately what I think needs to happen next for us is moving well into consideration, but then moving into trial. And something that our research shows, and then it's true in every quarterly report we put out there, if you don't know of us, or you maybe know of us, but you haven't tried us, you don't necessarily consider us a brand for you. It's not necessarily something you're like, oh yeah, Duluth, that looks like it would be a brand for me. But as soon as you try the product or as soon as you go to the store and try the experience, it flops. It's like moving from like 30% to 70%. Like it flops. That trial is so important for us. To get to trial, we have a few steps to get there. And that's really what we're focused on mostly. And then I would say the other thing for us is a big, big one that we look at is once we have you once you've tried us and once you give us a try, purchase with us, whatever, the next thing is like, how do we retain? So retaining is a very good, big part of us as well, because again, we have a loyal customer base, people who stay with us a long time. It's really important to us. We want to focus on those long-term relationships with customers. So there's all the other stuff, the conversions and the traffics and the things like that that help us with this. But I would argue some of those traffic specifically can be distracting. Like you can get really stuck in like those numbers and miss the bigger picture. Certainly as a publicly traded company, you can do that pretty quickly.
Yeah, I bet. So I always ask this towards the end of a show. How have you personally adopted, and then perhaps at the company with what you can share? I mean, there's two ends of the spectrum. There's, folks that are all in. There's folks that are still very apprehensive. How have you been playing it?
Yeah, well, we are definitely hands-on brands, workwear, build stuff yourself. I would say internally, we have a lot of people who are very, very uncomfortable with AI for many philosophical reasons, and which I completely understand. I think how we're approaching it is from an authenticity standpoint. One of the things that makes the brand a great brand is that we really are who we say we are. So it's workwear made for people who work by people who work. And so everything we do, including creating communications, illustrations, digital art, etc., does come from a human brain and a human hand, and that won't change and that cannot change. I think that said, AI is one of those things that really enables speed and efficiency. It's a tool like a hammer is, and so that's how we have a very strict sort of guardrails around how we use it and how we do not use it. And I'm pretty proud of what that's doing for the company because we understand where our roots are within it. I have no idea where AI is going to go in all the ways that it's going to take over everything, but Duluth is still going to make things with their own two hands and celebrate that and use AI as a tool.
Good answer. It's a tool. I would agree with you. Okay, we are down to the end of the show. We do a 2-minute drill, 7 questions, 1-word answer. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, a brand that you admire or that inspires you.
Rafa. Now, is this a one-word answer, or do I have to explain why?
Nah, one word answer is good.
Okay.
Okay.
Rafa.
Okay. Favorite app on your phone?
The one I use the most is I'm an old man, so it's the New York Times.
Last website other than Amazon that you shopped from?
It's a brand called MAP, MAAP, cycling apparel.
Something that you're not good at but wish that you were?
I'm terrible at drawing, and as an art director, that's always been embarrassing.
Charitable organization that you're passionate about?
Passionate about food banks and places like ocean cleanup, Parley Ocean Plastics, things like that, a plastic-free planet.
If you had one superpower, what would it be?
I don't know, honestly. I'm good.
Okay.
I'll watch them from down here. Yeah.
Other than family, what's your most prized possession?
My health, good knees, things like that, able body. I've seen a lot of a decrepitude around me and my family and whatnot. I'm really, really thankful for my health.
That's great. Garth, if people wanted to reach out to you on social media, where could they do that?
LinkedIn is by far the best.
Okay. Garth, great career, great brands that you've worked with. You've certainly given a lot of value to every place that you've been. Very thoughtful. So thanks for doing the show with me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, same. Thanks, Mark. My pleasure.
That's it. Today's game ball goes to Garth Weber for coming on the Marketing Playbook. To me, today's 3 game-winning marketing plays were as follows. Number 1, your unconventional background is your edge, not a detour. Garth didn't come up through a traditional marketing pipeline. He came up through poetry, editing, copywriting, and graphic design. Instead of treating this as a winding path, he built his entire brand philosophy on it. Storytelling first, tactics second. Wherever your background diverges from the normal path in your field, ask yourself if you're using that difference or hiding it. And number 2, Performance marketing without brand discipline is just noise. Garth was clear that every channel, every tactic, every performance push at Duluth still has to sound and feel like Duluth. It's easy to let short-term metrics pull your brand voice in 10 different directions at once. The brands that last are the ones that hold the line on identity, even while they chase conversion. And number 3, protect the new thing until it can stand on its own. When Duluth and earlier Wilson took on a business that didn't fit the existing model, like apparel inside a hard goods company, the move that worked was ring-fencing it. Separately, supply chain, separate operational rules, minimal drag on the core business. If you're building something new inside an established organization, give it room to grow on its own terms before you force it to fit the old playbook. Thank you, Playbook marketers, for listening to another episode. If you want to check out more pages of the Marketing Playbook, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast spot and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Until next time, the devil is in the details.